Next on Newsmax Prime, South Carolina's governor calls for the Confederate flag to come down. Coming up, Derek Harvey on that call. A sensible civil response or a cave-in to craven politics? Also ahead, Armstrong Williams has a personal connection to the Charleston shootings. He'll tell us about it. Plus, North Carolina caves to the highly financed, organized left on voter ID. Newsmax Prime for Monday, June 22nd starts now. Good evening and welcome to the Monday edition of Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, 2 people killed, dozens more injured when Taliban militants staged an attack at the Afghan parliament in Kabul. More on that in just a moment. But first, the Confederate flag flying in South Carolina led to controversy which carried over into the 2016 GOP presidential race this weekend, but all that changed this afternoon with a major announcement. Here's what South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley had to say late today in Columbia.
We are here in a moment of unity in our state, without ill will, to say it's time to move the flag from the Capitol grounds. To those outside of our state, the flag may be nothing more than a symbol of the worst of America's past. That is not what it is to many South Carolinians. The statehouse belongs to all of us. Their voices will be heard, and their role in this debate will be respected.
For more on this story, we are pleased to be joined by former intelligence officer Colonel Derek Harvey. Derek is also an advisor or former advisor to General David Petraeus, and he Skypes in tonight from Tampa. Derek, thanks for being here once again on Newsmax Prime.
Good to be here, JD.
Now, you currently serve as the director for the Global Initiative on Civil Society and Conflict. It makes you the perfect guy to go to for a reaction about what has been going on in South Carolina and specifically the statement from Governor Haley earlier today. What's your take on it?
Well, I think Governor Haley really thread the needle quite well because she's addressing a very tense situation in South Carolina politics. As you know from your political days, JD, words and symbols matter in forming a narrative. And unfortunately or fortunately, this symbol of the old Confederacy has created some baggage there. And what I was struck by was the way she articulated the issue and the unanimity that seemed to be present there of the congressional leadership, the U.S. Senate leadership, and others that were forming a unified background behind her. I think it was quite a change there in South Carolina politics, reflecting a change in the society.
And the unanimity displayed this afternoon in Columbia mirrors the response we saw in Charleston in the wake of the shootings. When you think back, and now you've had some time to think about Charleston, the actions last week, the actions yesterday on Sunday at the Emmanuel AME Church, your take on that community, and have they provided a model to the nation and the world?
I think it's a model. I think it's something that we need to be thinking seriously about, particularly when you look at Ferguson and Baltimore and other reactions that have taken place that have just led to senseless destruction. The community in South Carolina has taken a more mature process, an approach that is reaching beyond their normal groups and individual identities and trying to reach across and find a common pathway. They know their differences, but they're looking for common bonds. And I think the leadership in South Carolina has really stood out to me, which is very different from what I saw in Missouri and in Baltimore.
Well, the South Carolina reaction, apart from politics, has been instructive and indeed a model for the nation. But then you come back to politics, something I know too much about, perhaps. And there was a situation where a lot of the Republican presidential candidates were subjected to questions on the Sunday shows. And then today, South Carolina's senior Senator Lindsey Graham, a presidential candidate himself, calling for the removal of the flag. It seemed that Lindsey was trying to get out in front on this. Has the topic been politicized too much?
Well, it definitely became politicized, and I think it was a natural evolution given the times we live in today and how quickly an issue will accelerate through social media and regular media. I think he did get out ahead of it. I think it was very smart of him. But I also think he saw it coming through his contacts within South Carolina politics.
Well, another issue politicized by the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, President Obama, on the issue of gun control. This weekend, in fact, he left for a fundraising event out in California the day of the shooting. He went around continuing to talk about this issue. Should Second Amendment rights be affected by one man's action, in this case, the assailant in South Carolina?
Absolutely not, in my judgment. I believe that the Second Amendment, if there's going to be any change, has to be worked through a constitutional process. The rhetoric gets ahead of things, I think, quite often. You know, we're always going to have aberrant behavior. We're always going to have some extremists that are going to take some action, whether it's a car plowing into a crowd of people or something else. You can't stop it, but we have to understand why we have the Second Amendment and what it means in the American experience.
Colonel Harvey, we're going to take advantage of your experience in terms of intelligence and knowing Afghanistan quite well, as earlier today, the Taliban pulled off an extensive attack at the Afghan government building in Kabul. It turns out they set off a huge car bomb outside the gates, stormed the compound, then entered a building next to the legislative chamber. We're seeing scenes from that legislative chamber. The Taliban say they carried out the attack to coincide with a vote to endorse a new defense minister. Colonel, since you know that area well, is the Taliban in essence saying, we're here and we can attack at any time and any place?
Well, they're saying that, and they've shown that over the years, even when we had the large number of troops there along with NATO. They've always been able to conduct a high-profile attack in situations where they want to, like in Kabul or in Kandahar or some other place. It doesn't achieve their ultimate objectives, though. It keeps them in the news, but it's really not changing things on the ground. And JD, if I could make a point, I'm impressed to this point with the way in which the Afghan army has been responding. They're taking losses, but they are not losing a lot of territory, and they're giving the fight right back to the Taliban in many, many places.
So the Afghan army giving that fight back to the Taliban, and we noted today the killing of those who perpetrated the attack in Kabul. But I'm interested, Derek, in your assessment of what we've been hearing about ISIS coming into Afghanistan, and what is more likely, ISIS and Taliban teaming up, or perhaps a conflict between the Taliban and ISIS?
We already have a conflict underway between ISIS and the Taliban, much like we have a conflict between ISIS and Al-Qaeda or their group in Syria called Jabhat al-Nusra. This is part of what we see in the world today, is this fight within the jihadist extremist camp for leadership. This is not going to go away, and I expect ISIS to gain ground in a number of areas in Afghanistan.
And as we take a look at this, just one other question occurs, Derek. We talk about these disparate groups and these national governments. But in the final analysis, will we see a triumph of tribalism in Afghanistan? Because that seems to be the basis for all these conflicts for what, the past 8 centuries or so? 30 seconds.
Yes, sir. At the University of South Florida, we have something where we look at tribalism across the different parts of the world. And one common factor is the higher there is a degree of tribalism, the more likely you're going to have this type of violence and disorder resulting, particularly when you combine it with poor institutional development in these states.
All right. Derek Harvey, we appreciate the work you're doing now, the work you've done on behalf of this nation wearing the uniform of the United States Army, and as always, your insights here on Newsmax Prime. Now, you heard what Colonel Harvey had to say. We'd love to hear from you. And now it's easier than ever to get in touch with us. You can send me your comments via email, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can also include your comments here. NewsmaxTV.com/comments. We look forward to receiving those comments, and there's more ahead, so stay tuned.